You know, niggas gotta get their priorities together. Got their mind on the wrong things, spending their money in the wrong way.
Trapaholics, real trap shit.
Say you need that car with the rims and a trunk, just like Jim. It's more than life. Yeah.
I'm telling you. Talk to him.
Say you need that LV bag with the belt and the hat.
That's all you got though.
It's more than life. Yeah.
Talk to him. Real.
Say you wanna turn up at the club, like some bottles, impress them girls. It's more than life.
Fucking everybody.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And who dat? And we're back, and we have some more main course for you. And previously, we weren't sure about this main course. We were thinking it was going to be something like snail meat or some calamari, because we just weren't sure what the Darren Rizzi New Orleans Saints were going to look like against the Falcons, who were 6-3 coming in. And this was Sunday, November 10th, 2024 at 12 Eastern time in the Caesar Superdome. We didn't know what the Darren Rizzi Saints were going to be like. We didn't even know how the fans were going to react, and if there was going to be good attendance and good energy in the dome. But I mean, there was still even with the firing and what feels like a lost season, there were 70,000 people in attendance. But we're going to get into this main course, which is a 2017 victory, actually, on the over the Atlanta Falcons. Of all the teams left on the Saints schedule, if they could just get one more win, or if they just kind of have to win one more game, it being Atlanta the Falcons was the perfect one to have. Even though there'll probably be some more games down the line that they'll probably squeak out. There's some bad teams coming up: the Cleveland Browns, the New York Giants, the Los Angeles Rams. There's some pretty sad teams that the Saints will probably sneak out some wins over. But we already kind of talked about how if they do really have to go on any type of winning streaks, wins over the Jameis Winston Browns and the injury riddled Tampa Bay Buccaneers, so we don't get swept. Are about the only ones that we really care about. But let's get into this. Let's get into this 20-17 win over the Atlanta Falcons, who are still first in the division, but they just lost to who just a week ago we were thinking is the worst team in the league. So what does that make Atlanta Falcon the worst team in the league? I guess we'll have to wait and see. But I'm sure they definitely feel like that right now. But anyways, let's get into this. So can I get a menu? And so the Darren Rizzi New Orleans Saints, man, they just had a lot more life and energy. I wouldn't say they were necessarily disciplined, but definitely had a lot more life and energy, especially in the first half. The offense definitely had life and energy in the first half, and the defense definitely did as well. They were coming out and they were hitting like right out of the gate. But I think some of that energy kind of dissipated a little bit from the offense going into the second half, because they were only able to score 3 more points. But those 3 points were very crucial in them winning this game. But you can definitely tell that the New Orleans Saints, the players, definitely wanted to play and fight hard for the Darren Rizzi led Saints, who, before I forget this, I mean, the goober that we had, the absolute stooge that we had to listen to during commentary, he mentioned where Darren Rizzi was from, that he's from Jersey, So, and he was talking about Greg Olson. I guess I would have never guessed that he's from Jersey or from the Northeast. But he was saying it's a Jersey thing. It's a Jersey thing. So you have to be from Jersey to get it. What kind of what the attitude and the style is, it's a Jersey thing. And if you haven't seen the South Park episode, it's a Jersey thing where they're a parody making fun of the reality TV show Jersey Shore. I suggest you watch it, because it's one of their best, at least in my opinion. And right when Greg Olson started like bringing that up and talking about it, it's just a Jersey thing. That's like the bell that like right went off in my head. I feel I need to go watch that episode after that. But yeah, having to listen to Greg Olson, not one of my most favorite announcers. It's hard to like really any announcer while your team's kind of doing bad. But let's get into these team stats a little bit. So this was a game where the Saints have had a couple games like this where it's like they feel like they've dominated just all in like yards and first downs and stuff like that and still find a way to lose. That was kind of like this is kind of like a flip of the first matchup between the Falcons and the Saints because I mean Atlanta they had 25 first downs and the Saints only had 14 and I mean a good majority of them came in the just all most of them probably came in the first half for the Saints. And then this was something we've been kind of harping on a little bit was like the rushing yards that the Saints have been giving up. Well, they gave up a bunch in this game, and in previous weeks, if they had given up this many rushing yards and touchdowns in a game, they'd be getting blown out. So I think that falls on Atlanta Falcons not executing and taking an advantage to get points, which, Young Hoku missing 3 field goals, one being blocked by Ridgeway was wild. That's something you could have made tons of money on that, predicting that Young Hoku is going to miss multiple field goals in this game, and this was the first 3 missed field goal game that he's had. Man, it would have been nice to have one of those missed field goals back in week 4, and maybe I would be crazy to see what the Saints season would kind of look like if they would have had a little bit better luck in that regard. But they had all the luck being the Dan Rizzi Saints. But the rushing yards, uh, they had 32 carries for 181 yards and 2 touchdowns on the Saints. The Falcons did, and then the New Orleans Saints, who looked really good early on running the ball. I thought it felt like they were just going to go right down the field and score a touchdown, and it only took about 2 plays for Alvin Kamara to rip off enough yardage. Just needed 12 yardage to become the Saints' all-time leading rusher. But the Saints, the Falcons really clamped down on that after like the first couple possessions that the Saints had, and the Saints were having a hard time just finish ending this game. And the Saints only had 27 carries, almost the same amount of carries, but for like half as many yards, only had 96 yards, and weren't able to get in the end zone, even though they were down in the red zone on their first drive and went for it on 4th and 1. That was just wild. That I was so surprised when Taysom Hill wasn't able to pick that up. The blocking was okay, but I don't know, he just didn't hit it quick enough. And then passing yards, Kirk Cousins was uh, 38 of 23 for 306 yards, 0 touchdowns, and an interception that should have been like the game sealing play of the game. Was maybe the biggest play of the game. A honey badger interception where the Falcons looked like they were moving or at least in field goal range and just put a stop to that drive. So honey badger now he's has the most interceptions of current players, active players in the league with 36, which is just wild. And he's had a couple this year. He's had a couple dropped interceptions this year. It should probably be closer to 40. And then the Saints, Derek Carr looked amazing in the first half, hitting those deep bombs, those deep shots to Marvez Galdas-Scantling, who's not only been in the building for 2 weeks, didn't play the first week he was here. But Derek Carr there for a minute. Derek Carr almost had a perfect passer rating. I think that was probably after his second touchdown to Marvez Galdas-Scantling, and they were like inside like the 10-yard line of the Falcons. But he was 16 of 25 for 269 yards and 2 touchdowns and no interceptions. That alone ended up being like one of the biggest difference makers in this game is who won the turnover battle. Even though the Saints have had several games this year where they've won the turnover battle, had more rushing yards, and still lost. That was the game 2 weeks back against the Carolina Panthers. They had almost 200 yards rushing and had the only takeaway in the game and still lost. And then sacks, Atlanta was sacked 3 times for a 19-yard loss. Every single one of those being big time to either stop Atlanta drives or force them to attempt field goals. I mean, the three were the first one was where Peyton Turner came in almost unblocked and just decked Kirk Cousins and ended up forcing them to kick a field goal. But it was a strip sack. But we've talked about it. It seems like I say it every week. The Saints force fumbles every game. It seems like every game, but are never able to recover them. So that was one. And then Cameron Jordan also had his first sack of the season, actually, which that helped stall Atlanta Falcons drive. And then the big one was the strip sack at the end of the game. I guess that was the Falcons' final drive by Chase Young, where he stripped the ball and the ball rolled far back for like an 18-yard loss, which that was on top of on top of on top of Tyrann Matthews' interception. You could look at that. There was just so many big plays. You could look at that as maybe the biggest play of the game as well, because that forced them out of field goal range and where they were on the field, even with Young Hoku struggles. They forced them back far enough, and then they were able to get a little bit back of it back, but not able to get a first down. So on fourth down, they were in position to maybe kick. They'd had to rush their people out there to kick a 61-yarder, but with how the game played out, that was like the first defensive stand that the Saints have had like all year. They've been in so many situations like this year. It almost felt like it was just inevitable that they were going to lose, but they actually got the defensive stand. And then total yardage, 468 for the Falcons and 365 for New Orleans. So it was only about 100 yards different. Not like some discrepancies where we've seen like teams almost have like 500 yards like the Falcons, but then the Saints can't even eclipse 300. And then we talked about the fumbles. Falcons had two fumbles in the game, but the Saints, of course, just never lucky. A lot of that, like recovering fumbles and just turnovers in general, and just the game in general. A lot of it's luck, but man, the Saints, like we've said, they seem to force a fumble like every single game, but are never able to recover it. They had their own fumble, but didn't lose it either. So there's had a little bit of luck on their side, and then the one turnover was Tyrann Matthews' interception. And we're talking about Darren Rizzi, like the jersey thing, you know. We're talking about like the energy and the morale and the boost that he brought to this team. I mean, you saw it right out of the gate, just off their first drive and their first defensive couple series. But some people were thinking maybe that would bring some more. Be a little more disciplined, you know. But that wasn't really the case in this game because they still had a lot of penalties. The Falcons had 6 for 45, and the Saints had like their second highest total from last week when they had like 10 penalties for 100 yards. They had 8 for 76 in this game. This game could have been a little bit had a little bit more breathing room if they wouldn't have had as many penalties as they had, like holding calls and illegal man downfield and false starts. So brought the juice. Darren Rizzi brought the juice to the team, but he didn't bring much discipline. But you know, it's his first week, so hopefully in the game against the Browns, hopefully he can keep that energy up and maybe get a little more discipline out of them would be nice. And then third down conversion, the Falcons were 5 of 14, and then the Saints were just 5 of 13. Better than previous weeks, but not amazing or anything. And then the fourth down conversions, the Falcons converted 1 of 2, and the Saints. This is the first week where it doesn't seem like the Saints have been like overly impressive in converting fourth downs. And I think that's maybe because some of these games where they're behind and they're losing, they have to convert multiple to even stay relevant in the game. But they had the one on their first drive where Taysom Hill wasn't able to pick up the yard. And then time of possession, it was 35 minutes and 7 seconds to 24 minutes and 53 seconds. So the Falcons almost had 10 minutes more time of possession, but they just weren't able to capitalize when they were getting into Saints territory. Young Hoku missing those 3 field goals for the Saints was definitely clutch. And then just kind of went over Kirk Cousins. Threw for a bunch of yards, but besides that, he threw an interception and was sacked a couple times. Only had a quarterback rating of 75.1. So the Saints still gave up a ton of yards. I'd say Alontae Taylor accounted for a lot of that. It'd be nice to get another outside corner for the Saints to be their starter, so they can move Alontae Taylor back into the slot where he looked amazing a good portion of the season. But he gave up some big catches and was called for pass interference and holding several times in this game. I definitely didn't like what I saw from Alontae Taylor in this game as an outside corner. I guess his second game across from Shamar John Charles. And then Bijan Robinson was really the only other like real was like the biggest playmaker for the Falcons, because he had 20 carries for 116 yards and 2 touchdowns and a long of 37. And I thought the Saints were going to lose this game after they went they went 3 and out twice, 2 times in a row, like back to back, and then one of them came out after Bijan Robinson had that like 37-yard run for a touchdown to cut it to 20-17 and make it just a 3-point game. Like I honestly thought the Saints were going to gag up this victory, gag up the win, and lose after that. But there was still some other crazy stuff that happened in this game. Alvin Kamara was your leading rusher. He had 17 carries for 55 yards, and then he was in a long of 11, and then he had 6 targets with 5 catches for 54 yards, a long of 31, which he should have had like a long of 50 and a touchdown added to this. So he should have had like almost 150 yards from scrimmage if he didn't drop like the wide open pass on 3rd and 4 on a wheel route, which should have just been very routine and went for a touchdown to pretty much put the nail in the Falcons' coffin in this game. And that would have made when that happened, when he dropped that pass, I thought for sure the Saints were going to lose. I thought for sure the Falcons were either going to march down into field goal range or just like in the first game, just throw up a lollipop pass and get a pass interference drawn on Alontae Taylor and get them set up for at least a field goal opportunity to take it into overtime, where I figured the Saints were gonna choke them. But we were talking about the defense earlier. It was great to see them stand up and actually have a game-ending drive, some game-ending plays to secure the win. And then we had Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who had 3 targets and 3 catches for 109 yards with 2 touchdowns, a long of 67. Like he was doing his best. He was doing his best Vikings Randy Moss impression in this game. And then we already talked about Tyrann Mathieu's interception for a 6-yard return, 3 total tackles, three solo, and three pass deflections. And then we went over the sacks by Peyton Turner, who had a pass deflection as well, and a sack, and 4 combined tackles, 2 solo, and 2 assists, a tackle for loss, 2 quarterback hits, and 1 forced fumble. This was easily one of Peyton Turner's best games of his career, and hopefully he can build on that, and hopefully he can stay healthy, because we've seen this a lot from Peyton Turner. He'll have a good game where he has a sack or has a couple tackles for loss, and then the next thing you know, he's on IR. So hopefully Peyton Turner can build on this and not look like a complete bust of a first-round pick. And then we talked about Cameron Jordan getting his first sack of the year. He had 3 combined with 2 solo and 1 assist, a tackle for loss, a quarterback hit. And then Chase Young had a sack as well, definitely a game-changing sack on the Falcons' last drive to back them up like 18 yards on second down, made it like what, it was second and 28, and he had the sack, the one tackle, the one combined tackle, one solo, a tackle for a loss, two quarterback kicks, and the forced fumble, and then Demario Davis looked good out there, getting sideline to sideline as best of a 35-year-old leader of a defense can. He had one pass deflection, 10 tackles, two solo, and 8 assists. And then special teams, we went over Young Hoku. That was maybe the best Saints player of the game was Young Hoku, missing those 3 field goals. And then Blake Grupe was 2 for 2 on extra points and 2 for 2 on field goals. I think he's 18 of 19 for like a 96.3% on field goals. He's almost perfect this year in field goals. He's actually missed more extra points this year than he has field goals. Two missed extra points. And then Matthew Hayball was respectable in this game. He had like 1 or 2 punts that were inside the 5, and he had 5 punts for 224 yards with a 44.8 average and a long of 51. All right, so those are the stats. A lot of good, but still a lot of bad for considering how the Saints have played over the week, but over the past couple of weeks. But hopefully, Darren Rizzi, it's a Jersey thing. Hopefully, it's something you can build on. And so my pregame defensive MVP for this game was Cameron Jordan. And I mean, it's the second time that I've picked him where I pick him thinking like, oh, he's not very injury prone. So I don't think if I pick him as my MVP, he's going to get hurt. But also, if I pick him, I don't think it matters if he has a bad game or not, because he hasn't really done anything all year. Besides when I picked him the first time, he got the tipped interception off of Brian Bressee's helmet in the Buccaneers game. And then I pick him again and he gets a sack, but definitely an important sack in the game. But I don't think I can really pick him as the post game defensive MVP. Definitely think you have to go with Tyrann Mathieu because they were already in field goal range. They were moving it. No guarantee that Young Hoku was going to make that kick, but still, it would have made it a lot more difficult. And I think if the Falcons were ever able to tie this game up, that they more than likely would have won. And then offensive post-game MVP, definitely Marquez Valdez-Scantling. We were talking, he was doing his best prime Randy Moss Vikings impression with the 3 targets for 3 catches for 190 yards and 2 touchdowns and 67 yards. And then just for special teams post game MVP, probably just going with Blake Grupe just because he was better. He was perfect. He was better than Young Hoku, which who would be saying, who would have thought that a couple of years ago, that Blake Grupe was going to be having a better game than Young Hoku. So those are post game MVPs, and even pre-game MVPs for defender Cam Jordan, who I'd say I partially take some credit for that, but I definitely say it was definitely more bigger plays were made by Tyrann Mathieu and Chase Young. And then my hot take, I think this hit Darren Rizzi. We were wanting to see Darren Rizzi be in Bush League and having his team fired up to lay big hits. And Will Harris on the second drive of the Falcons laid a big hit on a running play on Tyler Algier that just you saw him. You saw that just kind of set the tone for at least the defense, because the offense was good in the first half, but the tone and the energy for the defense obviously carried over in the second half. They were still giving up a bunch of yards and were bend but don't break and forcing them all the missed field goals, but they were able to keep that energy up. And it was nice to see Will Harris back, having a defender back there that can bring the wood, and be an intimidating factor back there. So we definitely a good free agency signing in last offseason. I think he was sorely missed because you didn't have that big hitter, strong safety that teams were having to deal with all the running backs and say and wide receivers were having to be worried about getting a big hit laid on them. So I would say that uh, Bush League, and wanting to see some big hits from from the defense. Like defenders have been hitting Chris Olave every time he comes back and trying to take his head off and trying to end his career. So I would say that hit, and you've got to see some mean mugs and just some excitement from Darren Rizzi, and not even not just during the before the game or during the game, but heck, even after the game. I thought he was going to get enough. It looked like he was about to get in a fight or something with Peyton Turner, but it was actually he got pushed in the back and wasn't prepared for it after he chewed Peyton Turner out when there was just 30 seconds left in the game, and Peyton Turner was uh, celebrating on the sideline before they'd actually won the game. And if Peyton Turner knows anything, you got to wait until there's triple zeros on the clock before celebrating with this New Orleans Saints team. But I guess Peyton Turner ended up hitting him in the back when he wasn't expecting it, and he aggravated an old stinger that he had, and heck, it looked like his arms and his legs went limp, and then he was having a little conversation at midfield there for a minute. So I think we got what we want. We got the excitement, and definitely just like the polar opposite of Dennis Allen, even in press conferences, because he talk about the craziest story, the one to tell the media about how his first day as head coach for a game, and in the coach's office, he said must have took a huge shit and clogged up the toilet, and he said I felt like it was going to be a crappy day after that, but luckily it wasn't. We're getting the last win over any team that we really didn't want to lose to, and didn't want to get swept by the Falcons. So I would say that hot take hit, and hopefully we get a lot more of that. Hopefully we get a couple more games of the excitement and just the jersey thing on pregame and postgame press conferences, and maybe getting this team right. And if they do string off a couple more wins, I think the Saints are the seventh pick right now. If they still are in the top 10, I won't be devastated, but hey, if they string off a couple more wins, who knows? Darren Rizzi, I think people like him, and even after this razor thin win over the Falcons, it feels like a lot of people in the city are wanting to give him keys to the city, kind of like Clint Kubiak after the first 2 weeks of the game. So it's definitely a wait and see thing with Darren Rizzi. We saw how bad you can fall off from 2 weeks to the majority of the rest of the season. So just hopefully Darren Rizzi can keep that energy up. And then on to picks and scores. I was hard for me to believe that just an interim head coach, just coach change would be enough to get the win over who I thought was an okay team. I don't think they're going to do anything in the postseason in the Falcons, and just with how bad the Saints have looked and losing to the Carolina Panthers in the previous week, I just didn't see, and that having me labeling basically the Saints as the worst team in the league after that, I just didn't see the Saints doing it. But man, it was exciting. This is like one of the first games in a while where, even though I felt maybe it's in the best interest for them to lose, but it's still the Falcons. Man, I had my heart racing, and I was all nervous, and I still got some scares at the end of the game with the couple 3-and-outs, not being able to pick up first down to a couple first downs to run out the clock, and the drop by Alvin Kamara. So it was exciting. I haven't felt that in weeks since week 2 of the season, or maybe I guess you got kind of that feeling from the Philadelphia Eagles and the first Falcons game. You had that feeling in some close games, but you just got your guts and heart ripped out because they weren't able to close those games out. But hey, the Saints are still in decent position to win a couple more games, or get a good draft pick. But like I said, there's some really bad teams left on their schedule. The Browns, the Giants, the Rams, the injury riddled Bucks. Like there's some games that it's like they're just kind of feels now that they have some more life to them and energy and are wanting to play and probably are wanting Dan Rizzi to become their full-time head coach. You're seeing players turning the speaker back up in the locker room and dancing. You know, may mess up the Saints' final draft pick, but hey, I think it'll be more. You'll be able to get through it a little bit easier if they're at least interesting now, and they're definitely interesting now with Darren Rizzi as their head coach. But anyways, I guess on to Cleveland. I think I was saying week 1 and week 2 after those wins, like you better enjoy us, like better enjoy this. I know they say 24-hour rule or 48-hour rule, but I'm after those 2 wins, I took the entire week, the entire 2 weeks to celebrate those wins. So if you're a Saints fan and you or been feeling down for the good portion of the last 2 months or so, you might as well enjoy this one, hopping on Falcons podcast or timelines and stuff, and reading how they're so sad and they feel like their team's terrible. You might as well soak it in and eat it up, because there's no real telling. There's a lot of question marks from here on out, but even though I know it will mess up the draft pick and stuff, I still would like to get like 3 or 4 interceptions and get a win over the Jameis Winston Cleveland Browns, and then just not get swept by the Buccaneers. So those are kind of my 1 and 2 games that I'm kind of will be like okay with if they still win. But I mean, the Dolphins won last night, so that moved the Saints from 8 to 7. So I just have to see how this plays out. But I still want a good draft pick, but I want to be able to not be like lifeless and soulless, and maybe see something of optimism through this season instead of like losing out and being in the top 3. But anyways, I think that's all I have for you. So who dat? And can I get a check, please?